gentlemen, welcome back to DAO Talk Weekly. This is DAO Talk Weekly episode 43, I believe. Your one-stop shop for everything DAOs. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Persian.
Welcome back, my friend. Another week. We're getting some momentum, consistency, no breaks in between episodes, even though we do have a lot of crazy stuff going on the Tally side and just on the DAO ecosystem in general. How have you been, Frisian?
I've been good. Went on a short vacation. Went to the desert for a long weekend, came back slightly injured and sick, but ready to work,
Slightly injured. What happened?
I'm old, as we know. And if I walk too much wearing like sandals, basically, I get this like recurring stress injury on my feet. And I literally injured myself walking too much in sandals. So
is it like
that's where we're at.
arch thing, or like it's like internal, or is it like
It's like
skin
in
issue?
the I think it's the metatarsal, right? Is like where your toes connect to your feet. It's in the metatarsal on my big toe on my right foot. It's just like,
Dude, the foot fetish people are gonna love this episode.
oh my god, yeah, they probably love DAO Talk already.
Oh my god,
why not?
Well, enough foot content. Let's move right into the week. What dominated last Friday, honestly, right after we posted last week's DAO Talk Weekly episode, and it's kind of colored the rest of the conversation around this week, is the CFTC lawsuit with Ooki DAO, which we covered probably 6 or 7 months ago, pretty early in DAO Talk. We'll link that episode below in the show notes and some relevant, content around, what actually was the situation with the Ooki DAO versus CFTC lawsuit. But long story short, the CFTC clapped them in the courts. The courts issued the CFTC a sweeping victory, which essentially held Ooki DAO responsible for basically everything they were doing illegally. They basically said they were running an illegal securities exchange, and the individual members of Ooki DAO are on the line for, the exact number is $643,542 and then there's been like a cease and desist or like a gag order. I don't know what the exact legal term is for that, for all of the internet providers and front ends that are, I'm assuming Tally falls into this category, that are allowing Ooki DAO to operate. So a lot going on there, Frisian. I think the biggest take here, maybe you agree or disagree, is just make sure you get your shit in order if you're running a DAO or you're contributing to a DAO, because the government is not playing around. The U.S. government is not playing around, and I think we've operated in a kind of a gray area for a couple of years where, because no legislation or action was generally happening unless it was to these massive, ZAC, XBT scammers that were being brought to light, they thought, we could kind of operate in that gray area of the law. And then just because it was delayed, the government wasn't coming for you, but the government is coming for you and for DAOs. So the government is coming for DAOs. So get your shit in order. Frisian, thoughts on this? What should we care about? What's the big takeaway here?
I have a few thoughts. I haven't reviewed the case in depth because it kind of dropped while I was out, which I need to do. But there's a few things I think to keep in mind as general rules. One is, if you're doing something illegal, doing it via a DAO doesn't make it legal. Just in general, just know that, like at all in any way whatsoever. So just know that. Number two, just because you call yourself a DAO, and even just because you use a governor to, execute changes to the protocol or the treasury, doesn't mean it's actually decentralized. In the case of Ooki DAO, right, it's like, I think it was basically just still the core team that was actually executing on proposals, right? It's like just not really like a, there wasn't actually a lot of material decentralization to the project as a whole. And so, I think that like, I don't think like the justice system really cares whether you call yourself a DAO, right? I think where it's more relevant is, you know, uh, yeah, if in fact there is like a material level of decentralization to the project, which even in that case, like I'm not saying the CFTC would care about that. It just might be, you know, more challenging, right, to sort of have there be a specific group that would be, you know, responsible for the actual for you know for the actual project, right? I think, yeah, you know, we're in a tough spot as an industry where there's not actually like a really clear path towards regulatory compliance for a lot of crypto projects in the United States. I expect that to change in the coming years. And I think, you know, in the meantime, you should, you know, follow the rules and regulations to the best of your ability. And yeah, I haven't dug deeply into the Ooki DAO case, but you know, I don't think I don't think this is like a sterling sort of operation, you know, from a best practices standpoint, right? So those are a few things that come to mind for me. I think, you know, if you are operating as a DAO delegate or contributor in the United States, like having some kind of legal entity that you can use, you know, to try to separate like your operation and your business from you as an individual is ideal. And I think Ross probably dives into that here. You know, the concerning thing with this case in my mind is like, yeah, Ooki DAO, okay, maybe it's not actually a DAO in spirit or in reality. Maybe there are some, you know, significant violations taking place. But what you worry about is the CFTC sort of using this case as precedent to then go after things that are sort of less obviously concerning, to try to expand their jurisdictional reach. And we've seen the SEC do this, right? Now they're going after Coinbase. They kind of ran up the ladder of, you know, smaller, probably less well run exchanges to get to the one that's sort of like the most compliant, the most well run, the most legitimate, and be like, look, it's just like all the other ones that we built our precedent on. So hopefully that's not what's going on here, but I think we all need to be prepared for that to be what in fact is going on here. So yeah, those are a few thoughts I have. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer in any way, shape, or form, and I think, yeah, don't do illegal things because doing them as part of a DAO doesn't make them legal.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, like again, not legal advice. We're not lawyers. I think everyone knows this who's listening to DAO Talk. You know, we're not lawyers or giving you financial advice in any way. We're just talking. We're shit talking. But I think a lot of people, maybe myself included, fell victim to this a little bit in my head of like, oh, if you look behind the curtain, you kind of can see Ooki DAO wasn't necessarily really a DAO, and it wasn't a sterling operation like you said. So I think a lot of people maybe just were like, oh, this is not relevant to the real DAOs that are operating because, you know, of course they're going to get caught. But I think you're right. You could use this kind of as a stepping stone. I think Ross talks a lot about this in the thread as well around like at its core, like, yeah, it's a DAO and yeah, it's built on this decentralized technology and ideally it is decentralized, but it's not necessarily, doesn't change the fact that it's the same thing. It's humans operating a business for profit, usually for profit, or trying to find profit. So the government is going to, you know, you're going to draw the eye of Big Brother in this situation. So yeah, just at the end of the day, like, don't do anything illegal, especially as, you know, there's not a lot of regulation or legal suggestions on how to run these things, you know, properly. It's different, but it's not very different in regards, I mean, in the eyes of the law, I would say. So, and yeah, like when you talk about like delegation, I was thinking like, I've heard multiple like anecdotal stories around like people who are on multi-sigs who just or don't want to deal with the tax implications of being on a multi-sig for a DAO, just because it's not looked favorably upon by the government, and there's not a lot of regulation around what it looks like in terms of like operating as a delegate, which goes into the whole conversation around like delegate compensation and what are the like not sexy things talked about being a delegate in terms of like taxes and being, you know, pseudo anon or being fully anon. It's interesting. You could go down an entire rabbit hole with that and talk about that forever. But Ross, I would say, I don't know if you agree, but I think you do, is maybe one of the best DAO legal resources on Twitter or in the world per se. So we'll link his thread here. We've interviewed him on DAO Talk, right?
Yeah,
you interviewed him, right?
Ross is one of few people who deeply understands like DeFi and crypto as a builder, who deeply understands DAOs as a current and former DAO contributor, and also deeply understands the law as it relates to DAOs. And so he's definitely worth paying attention to on this topic.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you want a more, you know, not pedestrian, but more of the people take, you know, why should you care if you're just your average DAO enthusiast, whether you're a delegate or just involved or you love, you know, your social DAOs? Check out Tally newsletter number 101. It says 100 here, but it's number 101. The regulation DAOnload from Cool Horse Girl. She talks about the CFTC case, along with providing a lot of context around different laws that are being passed around the country. Wyoming is particular because they have the most legislation around DAOs and kind of like where DAOs tend to register if they register with the government. Go check that one out. It's great. I think it's about like a 5-minute read. And while you're there, you can get all of your updates on proposals that are going out throughout the DAO ecosystem, particularly like we talked about last week, the Arbitrum proposals, the first ones. Let's just check those while we're here. Frisian, I know you voted in them. When do these end? It looks like they're going to pass.
So Arbitrum has a pretty long voting period. It's 14 days. Both AIP 1.1 and AIP 1.2 are definitely going to, you know, get more for votes than against votes. The bigger challenge is reaching quorum. So making sure there's enough for votes to pass the proposal. So if you scroll down, it'll give you a quorum timeline. Yeah, so we're close. We're so close, but not quite there yet. But I think there's, almost more than an additional week left in the voting period. So hopefully we'll get there for both proposals.
Absolutely. Go check those out on Tally. We're looking at Tally's dashboard right now for the Arbitrum proposals. If you're not watching, go check those out. And then also while you're in the regulation DAOnload, that Tally newsletter episode this week, we got some stuff from Gitcoin and from Nouns DAO as well, along with 10 things to read or listen to, including DAO Talk Weekly, Meme of the Week. Go check it out. Link will be in the show notes as always. Other news this week, AWS went down. Why is that important? Because we realized, Tally included, a lot of DAO tooling platforms are reliant on AWS for their server capabilities. So when AWS goes down, Tally goes down. And that is important because if there is a large vote, Arbitrum has that longer proposal period or that voting period. But what if it wasn't a week left? What if it was 30 minutes left in the proposal and you can't access Tally or you can't vote on chain? We built Tally Zero. Dennison, our CEO, built it a few months ago. We talked about this in an episode before because we kind of predicted this was going to happen. Something like this was going to happen. And we saw it come to fruition this week. This is why it's important. This is why we predicted this use case and built it when it wasn't really necessary for things like this. And maybe it wasn't super high stakes this week, but when it is high stakes, it is important to have tools like this that are, completely decentralized, not dependent on third-party servers. It's deployed on IPFS. Frisian, thoughts on this? Have you used it at all yet, or have you just, played around with it a little bit?
I haven't used it yet. Dennison used it to vote in the Arbitrum AIP 1.1 and 1.2 proposals, which is dope. We also saw some a dev or two ship a few improvements to Tally Zero when this happened this week. So this is an open source tool. If you are a developer in the ecosystem that likes DAO stuff and likes decentralization, definitely check out Tally Zero so we can all easily vote regardless of what's happening with AWS or any centralized organization that is part of the tech stack of most DAO tools.
For sure. Very important tool, and I'm excited to see hopefully more tools like this get built. This week got a lot of traction this week. Thank you, Dennison, for building Tally Zero. Awesome. Like I mentioned before, Tally newsletter number 101. So you know what that means. There was 100 last week, and we went through a quick thread on the top 5 Tally newsletter articles, which are important, I think, because it kind of shows the past year and a half of the DAO ecosystem at a glance in terms of what was super important. If maybe you forgot, number 1 was the MakerDAO governance debates, which was from Monet Supply. That was pretty crazy. It's also like crazy to me because I remember a lot of these moments and how hot and debated they were. And it's kind of just like, we always talk about like the news cycle in crypto, like 1 month is like 7 years, but like these all felt very existential. And here we are still kicking, a year and a half, 2 years later. But number 1 was the MakerDAO governance debates. Number 2, SudoSwap and the impending NFT royalty crisis. That was pre-Blur. Blur kind of, took us straight to zero with NFT royalties. Number 3, Governor DAO's takeover, which was quite a poignant prediction. That was in 2021. Here we are 2 years later. Governor DAO's kind of have taken over, i.e. Tally. Issue number 74 was number 4, non-fungible governance, NFT governance around, the soulbound token debate, non-financialization of governance. And then the last one, which is from Cool Horse Girl, one of the more recent episodes, was DeFi's Great Paradox, VC token holders, which was around the Uniswap vote, I believe, to deploy on a certain chain, where A16Z kind of unloaded their full clip of delegation voting power into the vote to kind of sway it, and then the DAO ecosystem kind of came around and swayed that vote back towards where they wanted it to go. But 101 editions of the Tally newsletter, 101 more to come. We're excited about the Tally newsletter along with DAO Talk. We'll put the links in the show notes as well to go subscribe. Virgin, you've been around longer than I have to kind of see the growth of Tally newsletter, and it's kind of been you've kind of ushered it into this next great era, making the Tally newsletter great. Again, it was always great. It's just kind of gone through a few iterations of what it's looked like, who's been the author, but it's one of the, I think, lesser known resources in terms of like DAO and DeFi content in space. Thoughts on it, where it's come, where it's going, where it's at?
Yeah. It was, started and scaled by the great Monet Supply, but eventually he moved on to do other great things in the space. He's a great follow on Twitter if you're interested in DeFi and risk, in Maker especially. It took us a while to find someone to replace him, but we're in a really good groove now with Cool Horse Girl. It's a little bit of a different vibe. Nate was like a really, 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 really deep dive on DeFi and governance. Cool Horse Girl is more like she brings really strong knowledge of DeFi and governance, but she's more hitting like things from like a TLDR. So if you're just trying to understand the really important aspects of whatever the most important thing that happened in DeFi and governance was for the week, I think the Tally newsletter is actually the best resource for that in space. So check it out.
Absolutely. We'll link it in the show notes as well. I would definitely just go read it. It's super easy to read, super short. Not super short. It's packed with content, but 3 to 5 minutes every Tuesday. And then we cover, a little bit of it in the podcast as well. But let's bring it home. This event will be happening today. So if you are listening to this when it comes out or the week after, you can go listen to this 100%. Go listen to the full recording. We are doing a space with Earnify, who is partnered or acquired by Bankless, who has a tool around finding the airdrops and earning the most you can earn in Web3. Frisian, give us a little bit of a breakdown on what's happening today with Earnify and how Tally is integrating with them and why people should care.
Yeah, Earnify is really cool. You could kind of think of it as like an on-chain notifications service. That's probably even selling it short, but it's basically like, if you want to understand like anything that's relevant to you that's happening on chain, you can use Earnify to do that. So one relevant thing that happens for a lot of folks on chain is DAO votes. And, if you own governance tokens in various protocols, sometimes it's hard to keep track of like when votes are happening. It's not like they happen on some sort of pre-assigned schedule. Like on-chain governance is permissionless. Somebody might just put a proposal up there, at any time. And so Earnify is a really great resource for knowing anytime that a DAO proposal goes live where you have governance, power in that DAO. So very, very cool product. Earnify was acquired by Bankless, and they're kind of like building out a whole product, organization within Bankless that's kind of focused on this, on-chain, kind of on-chain notifications use case. And I think it's really cool. We're really proud and excited to be partnered with Earnify, and we're really looking forward to the Twitter space later today. We're going to be talking, the whole Tally crew will be there. Dennison, Raph, myself, we're going to be talking with Dawson, who's the founder of Earnify and is really smart, really unique, really awesome, very fun person. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, super excited about that space. Super excited about like that notification space in general. Kind of like, this is more traditional, but I like, thinking about like SMS notifications and maybe eventually voting directly from SMS or some type of, just lowering the barrier to entry in terms of like getting notified and being involved in DAO governance. So one of those tools that is helping usher us towards that. Go check that out. We'll link that in the show notes. Yeah, that'll be in the show notes if you listen to this, because it'll be complete by the time this goes live. So excited for that later today with you, Frisian, and the rest of the team. The whole Tally team will be there, like you said, which is pretty awesome. Rarely do we get the entire team on a space. As always, subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review if you haven't yet. We don't have a lot of reviews on there. We have some 5-star reviews. We're ranked 5 stars, but we need more quantity, not quality. Even if it's bad, just tell us what you think. Go subscribe. Hit us up on Twitter if you want to talk. Subscribe to the Tally newsletter at tally.newsletter.xyz. We will see you next week for episode number 44. Pretty crazy. This has been DAO Talk Weekly. Frisian, it's an honor. Peace.
Peace.